All right, clause 10, improvement, continual improvement. The clause 10.1 talks primarily about nonconformities and the rigor that goes to it. If you're going to be certified, and I presume that most of you, as I've said a few times, are probably not, but if you are, you need to have both corrections and corrective actions. So just to explain that, if you have a non-conformance, like you said you would do risk assessments on a quarterly basis, and they never happened at all over, let's say, 12 months, the correction is to do one, to go do it, to take the action necessary to correct it, and then deal with any consequences. In other words, you may have identified that a risk appeared a year ago and the control, there was a control problem, and so you need to deal with whatever that has now exposed. But that correction doesn't fix the cause. So you need to evaluate the need for action to eliminate the cause of the nonconformity. In other words, root cause analysis to ensure that it does not, and here's some keywords, occur again, or occur somewhere else. By reviewing it, determine the cause, the root cause, and if similar nonconformities exist or could occur, and then implement that action. So the key to closing out nonconformances isn't just to do the thing you didn't do, is to understand why didn't we do it and to make sure that can't happen again. Because if you don't do this last part, then the thing is going to keep failing at regular intervals. And I think it's this lack of root cause analyses. In my memory, looking back on a number of these in the early days, the lack of root cause analysis and the lack of really getting to the actual key issue was probably what caused them to fail over time. With root cause analysis, and I don't have a slide here on that, with root cause analysis, the key objective of it, or the key, technique that I use is to keep asking, I guess, the so what or how did that happen type question, until you get to a point where you really can't answer that question anymore. I had a client in the aged care space where they had a failure of an aged care system, and the aged care system failed when users couldn't enter any data into it. They were logged in, but they couldn't actually key. It just was non-responsive. And when they explored why it was doing what it was doing, it was because a log file got filled. And once the log file was filled, it couldn't write any more transactions, so it stopped processing transactions and just kind of queued them or dropped them or failed or whatever it did, depending on the architecture. Obviously, I think it probably just stopped taking them. In other words, it wasn't responding anymore to user inputs. Now, this is in aged care. So the system's now offline until somebody fixes the problem. And when they did their root cause analysis, that's what they arrived at, that the log file got full. But that's not the root cause. The question that then gets asked is, but how did it get full? Or probably maybe a better question, why did it get full and nobody dealt with it? So who was looking at it and should have cleared it before it got to 100%? And if nobody was looking at it, or somebody was looking at it but it wasn't frequent enough, why did that happen? And so as you keep going back, you get to this point where if you fix that root cause, you end up with, hopefully, the process not happening again, the failure. So that's improvement. And the second part around corrective actions is actually, I'll probably just cover that then, 10A and B, dealing with root cause analyses. The second part, 10.2, and here you see that phrase that I said, the organisation shall continually improve the suitability, adequacy and effectiveness of the ISMS. Just basically means call out any small issues, big issues, any improvements and capture it, put it into some kind of record or register, because over time you can prioritize these, gather them together. Maybe they become a small project for change. Maybe as you get staff, you can add those staff to it, to picking up these smaller pieces. Maybe the improvements are about education and learning for people in the broader business. So have a process to continually improve your ISMS. And a part of a way to do that is to look at these registers. You've got a few, and there's probably one or two more that you might have. Competency might be one, the controls SOA register. Look at, your risk register, your non-conformance and improvements register, maybe your incident register. And there's a phrase I learned in CommBank. It was called balcony and dance. In other words, that every now and then we want to get up on the balcony and look down on the dance floor and just assess how things are going. Kind of a governance model, stepping up into governance and saying, what do these tell us? In the non-conformance register, is there any particular pattern to this? Is there a role or a responsibility? Is there an underfunding that's triggering these? Is there a level of competence we don't have that if we resolve that, we'd be better off? What are the root causes of incidents? Are they predictable? If so, if these incidents are occurring, why aren't we identifying them at the risk process and doing something about them to treat the gap and not waiting for the incident to occur? And with our improvements, are we doing these in a timely way based on what we're seeing in these other spaces that suggest that, these sorts of things are the stuff we don't want to happen? This is how we want to manage things. So how are we going with prioritizing change and improvement and all of those bits and pieces? And so this idea at clause 10.2 is, and the phrase is continual improvement. It doesn't mean continuous as in never ending. It means step by step, every now and then incremental steps, so that say from implementation to year one, you might have made a half a dozen incremental improvements in some areas, and that's fantastic. You may bundle them all up and do them as a change program at the end, but you want to be trying to find ways to get better at doing all this stuff over time. As it turned out, I did have a slide on non-conformities, which has basically said what I walked through. Eliminate it, correct it, take a corrective action. And the last part that I didn't really talk about, the standard requires you to confirm that the corrective action was effective to eliminate the cause and maintain some evidence of that. This is an area of target by auditors, because if you're not doing these 3 steps, then there is a chance the non-conformity will reoccur, and that puts pressure on the continual certification and your certification suitability, I guess. The last slide I have here is continual improvement. As I talked about, you do need to not only do continual improvement, but you need to do maintenance. Here are some areas that obviously are going to change over time, issues and interested parties, and probably your scope. Leadership, adding new leaders into the governance function, maybe changing the hierarchy of it. For example, if you've got an IT-oriented scope, as we talked about earlier, the leadership of the ISMS might not include business people in that scope at that point. I've seen this before. But if you expand the scope, you want to change the leadership and start to engage with those other leaders. Changes in policy, changes in roles, machinery of government is always going to kick in, for better or for worse. So roles will change, structure will change, functions will change, even departments and the way you sort of centralise, decentralise. I don't know if that's a Tassie thing. It's definitely a New South Wales government thing. They want to do that every cycle, it feels. Something that mightn't change very often is risk criteria and your ISMS objectives, but there's nothing stopping you from improving, evolving, rewording, and updating. The support clause might change, the resources, the awareness, competency, all those things, and the refinement of that. Clearly, operations, risks, and controls, this thing will change probably the most. New systems, new controls roll out, new upgrades, staff changes, procedure improvements, incidents, and all of those things are going to change how things get done here. And clause 9, performance evaluation, metrics, audit, those things might change, particularly your metrics. And if you're doing this maintenance, these activities ensure the continued suitability, adequacy, and effectiveness of your ISMS. And that's really the plan, do, check, act cycle. If you think that right through, that's what gives us, at the end of this, the ability to see how well we went and to continue to make it better so that we achieve the goals that we set at the outset. Now, I'm just going to hold there and just see if there are any questions. I'll flick over here.
I'm actually curious to just see, depending on, because everyone's at different levels of maturity in different agencies, but I'm just curious to see how many people in the training today are keen to pursue further training in the ISMS space, and therefore developing something further in around their own business, around their own agency. Just as an indicator, either thumbs up or something like that, just to get or please feel free to chat